Invention of radio. The idea of wireless communication predates the discovery of radio, with experiments in wireless telegraphy via inductive and capacitive induction and transmission through the ground, water and even train tracks from the 1830s on. James Clerk Maxwell showed in theoretical and mathematical form in 1864 that electromagnetic waves could propagate through free space. It is likely that the first intentional transmission of a signal by means of electromagnetic waves was performed in an experiment by David Edward Hughes around 1880, although this was considered to be induction at the time. In 1888, Heinrich Rudolf Hertz was able to conclusively prove transmitted airborne electromagnetic waves in an experiment confirming Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism. After the discovery of these Hertzian waves, it would take almost 20 years for the term radio to be universally adopted for this type of electromagnetic radiation. For many scientists and inventors experimented with wireless transmission, some trying to develop a system of communication, some intentionally using these new Hertzian waves, some not. Maxwell's theory showing that light and Hertzian electromagnetic waves were the same phenomenon at different wavelengths led Maxwellian scientists such as John Perry, Frederick Thomas Troughton, and Alexander Trotter to assume they would be analogous to optical signaling 5-6, and the Serbian-American engineer Nikola Tesla to consider them relatively useless for communication since light could not transmit further than line of sight. In 1892, the physicist William Crookes wrote on the possibilities of wireless telegraphy based on Hertzian waves. And in 1893, Tesla proposed a system for transmitting intelligence and wireless power using the Earth as the medium. Others, such as Samuel Dahl, Barnes, Sir Oliver Lodge, Reginald Fessenden, and Alexander Popov, 11, were involved in the development of components and theory involved with the transmission and reception of airborne electromagnetic waves for their own theoretical work or as a potential means of communication. Over several years starting in 1894, the Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi built the first complete commercially successful wireless telegraphy system based on airborne Hertzian waves radio transmission. Marconi demonstrated application of radio in military and marine communications and started a company for the development and propagation of radio communication services and equipment. Marconi British Post Office engineers inspect Guglielmo Marconi's wireless telegraphy radio equipment in 1897. In 1894, the young Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi began working on the idea of building a commercial wireless telegraphy system based on the use of Hertzian waves. Radio waves, the line of inquiry that he noted other inventors did not seem to be pursuing. Marconi read through the literature and used the ideas of others who were experimenting with radio waves, but did a great deal to develop devices such as portable transmitters and receiver systems that could work over long distances. 12 Turning what was essentially a laboratory experiment into a useful communication system. By August 1895, Marconi was field testing his system, but even with improvements he was only able to transmit signals up to 1/2 mile, a distance Oliver Lodge had predicted in 1894 as the maximum transmission distance for radio waves. Marconi raised the height of his antenna and hit upon the idea of grounding his transmitter and receiver. With these improvements, the system was capable of transmitting signals up to 2 miles 3.2 kilometers and over hills. 29 Marconi's experimental apparatus proved to be the first engineering complete commercially successful radio transmission system. 32 Marconi's apparatus is also credited for saving the 700 people that survived the tragic Titanic disaster in 1896. The first patent ever issued for a Hertzian wave radio wave-based wireless telegraphic system. In 1897, he established a radio station on the Isle of Wight, England. Marconi opened his wireless factory in the former Silk Works at Hall Street, Chelmsford, England in 1898, employing around 60 people. Shortly after the 1900s, Marconi held the patent rights for radio. Marconi would go on to win the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909 and be more successful than any other inventor in his ability to commercialize radio and its associated equipment into a global business. 12 In the U.S., some of his subsequent patented refinements, but not his original radio patent, would be overturned in a 1935 court case upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1943. 20th century. In 1900, Brazilian priest Roberto Landel de Moura transmitted the human voice wirelessly. According to the newspaper Jornal do Comércio, June 10, 1900, he conducted his first public experiment on June 3, 1900, in front of journalists and the General Consul of Great Britain, C.P. Luton, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, for a distance of approximately 5.0 miles 8 kilometers. The points of transmission and reception were Alto de Santana and Paulista Avenue. 1 year after that experiment, he received his first patent from the Brazilian government. It was described as equipment for the purpose of phonetic transmissions through space, land and water elements at a distance with or without the the use of wires for months later. Knowing that his invention had real value, he left Brazil for the United States with the intent of patenting the machine at the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C. Having few resources, he had to rely on friends to push his project. Despite great difficulty, 3 patents were awarded: the wave transmitter October 11, 1904, which is the precursor of today's radio transceiver, the wireless telephone, and the wireless telegraph, both dated November 22, 1904. The wireless Edwin Armstrong inventor Edwin Howard Armstrong is credited with developing many of the features of radio as it is known today. Armstrong patented 3 important inventions that made today's radio possible: regeneration, the super heterodyne circuit, and wideband frequency modulation, or FM. Regeneration, or the use of positive feedback, greatly increased the amplitude of received radio signals to the point where they could be heard without headphones. The superhet simplified radio receivers by doing away with the need for several tuning controls. It made radios more sensitive and selective as well. FM gave listeners a static-free experience with better sound quality and fidelity than AM.